Welcome to Journey. My guest today is author and educator, evangelist Janice Robinson. Now, after 20 years of dedicated service to the New York City Department of Education, Evangelist Robinson heard the voice of God telling her to move to Florida. Reluctant, she packed her bags and she and her son were obedient and made the journey. With no job and little money, Evangelist Robinson and her son soon had no food to eat. With faith on her side, Evangelist Robinson did not give up. These experiences are told in her autobiography, Hope Without Faith. She is here today to share her incredible journey. I hope you can all relate to, connect with, and be empowered by her story.
The sun shines bright as it moves across my face. I feel the light and everything is in its place. Oh, I woke up feeling great. Today was made for me, and life is good the way it should, the way it was meant to be. And it's a beautiful day.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Janice, on Journey today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, you've got quite a story. You've got quite a story. I think anytime we hear no food to eat, our ears perk up and our hearts are tender and humbled to that situation, because everyone wants to know, how do you get in that situation? So we're going to go back and talk about young Janice. Where were you born?
Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay, but you worked for the New York Department of Education, so at some point you made the journey to New York.
Yes, I did. I decided to move here when my sister and my brother had moved here to New York. And at the time I was still young in high school, but I was willing to come to be with my older sister because she was sick a lot. Okay. And I felt that being here would be a support system for her.
And you are one of how many children?
Well, I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers, but
big family.
My older sister and my oldest brother have passed on to be with the Lord.
And you moved as a teenager, so you're in high school. Now you're going to be educated in New York, living with your older siblings. Was that a tough move for you?
It was. It just felt comfortable being there because my sister. But at times, it was pretty scary at times because it's a bigger city than where I came from, which was, in the South in Montgomery, Alabama.
A little bit slower in Montgomery, Alabama.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So you get to New York and you decide to obviously stay and go to school there.
Yes. And
you went to a couple of different universities or colleges.
After leaving high school, I went to the College of Staten Island. And that was where I lived at. And then after I graduated, I went on to Columbia University to take speech pathology. But I had originally graduated already with my associate degree in English and history, and then I went on to get my BA in education.
Did you always know that you wanted to teach?
Well, at first I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer, and my family would tell me that, because I always want to be in charge of things. Okay,
so there's what, 9 siblings total?
It was 9, yes.
So where were you in that family?
Right in the middle of it. I was like the 6th child.
So that's why you needed to be a lawyer, because you had to be a diplomat and try to take charge of some things, I'm sure, being right in the middle.
Yes, absolutely.
So no law, education.
Yes. I felt at that time that I wanted to be a teacher because I was always instructing people what to do and everything. Even at my house with my older siblings, I was there to instruct and try to help them do things that I know that I didn't understand what to do, but I just felt like I knew. So they will allow me to do that.
That take charge attitude.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, when you guys were growing up, Were you a family that attended church on a regular basis?
Oh, absolutely. Our church was directly behind our house, so we didn't have far to walk.
So it was your backyard.
Absolutely. Yes, very, very close to us. And all of us had to go to church, you know. Mostly that's what we did in the South. It wasn't a lot of things to do. So at the church, most of our friends was there. And so when my mom would get up early in the morning, she would make breakfast. And of
Because
course,
that's what moms do in the South.
that's right. And it smelled delicious too.
Of course.
And so we would get up and get ready for Sunday school, and then we would stay for church. And even in the evening, we would go back and
Oh, yeah.
we would have church at nighttime too.
Evening
And-
service.
Yes.
I remember those days.
Yes, and it was fun too because, you know, they had many activities for us to do.
And it was a part of your life. I mean, with it being in your backyard, it was a part of your life. Now, did you know early on that you had a special relationship with God?
Oh, at that very time, I felt it strongly when I was a little girl. When I went to Sunday school, when Sunday school was over, the young children had to come into the service, actually. And so when we came into the service, we had to be very quiet.
Oh, yes.
But sometimes, you know, they would make noise. And being myself, want to instruct, I would just give them the eye, and everyone would be quiet.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
Oh, as a child, you gave the other children the eye and they knew what to do.
Yes, absolutely.
So you were definitely destined to go into this education role, to be a leader
I think so.
over things. But you felt that influence, because as we go further in your story and we get, you know, deeper into your book that you wrote, Hope Without Faith, you have to have a tight spiritual relationship, and I was curious to know exactly when it started. So really, you're born into the faith, and as you aged, your faith grew. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. As a young child, I just felt a strong sense of faith, knowing that there is a God, and the things that, you know, we had to believe and trust in, you know, when we were young. And basically, my mom taught us about, you know, God, and that's how we began to go to church. And I just feel that in my faith, I believe that everything that involved my life was surrounded by God. I just had a sense of knowing that things that I did as a young girl, as a teenager, it's that I had to do the right thing.
Right.
And if it wasn't right, I felt it
Right.
in my spirit that there was something wrong.
Right.
And so I had to search it out, go to the Bible, read, and basically most of my faith came from the Word.
And the Word led you. So through your life, as you were going through school and as you were being educated as a teacher and you start working as an adult, obviously you were in New York, you found a church home there.
Yes.
And your connection with your faith allowed you to hear a voice.
Yes.
Talk to me about that experience, because you're a decorated educator in New York. You've gotten awards and you've been commended for many of your things. So you certainly were recognized in your field. When people are at the top of their game in their field in an area, they typically want to stay. But you heard a voice.
Yes, I did. Myself, as reading in the Bible, I began to speak to God, talk to Him. And it took me a little while to learn that. But there were times when I felt that God was speaking to me, things that I felt in my spirit, or things that I dreamed about. And I have a lot of dreams, and also visions that comes to me. And from the dreams and visions that I have experienced, I felt in my spirit a good sense of knowing that it was God that was speaking to me.
When you say you speak to God, I mean, many people would think you're praying to God, but do you mean you're having a conversation with God?
Yes, I am. I do that a lot. I do it around, you know, my sons, other people. And even when I'm just in the house by myself, I begin to speak to God and say things that's on my mind and things that I have experienced, and just tell him how much I love him and thank him of how much he has taken care of me and my sons.
And this dialogue, was this something that carried on when you were a child, or did that start in adulthood?
It really started when I became a young teenager, when I began speaking with him at my home, where I was afraid because I thought that people would look at me strangely. But as I grew up...
She talking to herself?
Yes. As I grew up, it became more relevant that I continue to speak to God, because at that time, I felt I love him, yes, and I have a relationship with him, and I have an intimacy with him. And that feeling went away because I knew that it was God that I was speaking to, and I enjoyed talking with him, and I enjoyed having a relationship with him.
Now, did you always get direct responses like the one we're about to talk about?
Yes. At times, you know, when you say that you are having a relationship with the Lord and speaking with him, you have a spirit man in you that shows you and tell you things that you feel. And I just felt that at times when God spoke to me and said different things to me, I heard it in maybe a voice, a small voice, or sometimes in my spirit man. And when I hear those things, my spirit connect with those things.
When you say spirit man, explain that to us.
Well, you know, your spirit, how you feel.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, we feel bad at sometimes, and then we feel good. And so at the times when I'm feeling good, I'm excited about things or whatever, because God is good, and he loves us, and he would never speak anything bad to us. So I felt that it was God speaking to me and telling me things that I need to know to direct my path. And so when I hear from him, I pray and I believe that is God that's speaking to me. And then I will move into whatever he tells me to do. If he tells me to go somewhere, I will go. And if he tells me not to, then I won't go. And
so you've always moved in that path.
Yes, I have.
You know, always been the obedient servant or good and faithful servant, and listened to his word. So tell us about the time that you were in this classroom. Like, what was life like? You have two sons, correct?
Yes.
So at this time, you're a mother. You've received accolades in New York City for your works that you've done, and then suddenly you hear the voice, and it's time for us to take a short break, but we're going to talk about that voice when we return. We'll have more with evangelist Janice Robinson after this break. For everyone just joining us, I'm your host, Robin Reed. My guest today is evangelist Janice Robinson. She is an educator and author of Hope Without Faith, How to Ignite God's Supernatural Blessings on Your Life. So before the break, we were talking about you speaking to God, and not just in a prayerful sense, but actually having conversations, and that you've always moved in whatever path he's directed for you. But I asked about where your life was. You have two sons. You were the mother of two sons. You were teaching. Many accolades, as we said, inside the New York City Education Department. And were you in a classroom? How did your day start that day?
Well, I was in the classroom with my students, and one of the speech teachers came in, and they had an art drawing for the children to do. And at that particular time, we had to do an art project for a fair that we were having at our school. And the children had to draw things, and we had to write about things for that particular project. And that very day, there was a question I had to ask the children, what state did they want to fly over? And we had a little boy named David, and he used to always go to Florida to visit his grandmother. And so when we had a choice to decide which state, everyone chose Florida, where David lived. And at that particular time, we had worked on a project, read books, did drawings, write stories and things like that. And we were just getting prepared to take it outside, you know, to let all the different schools that came to visit with their projects. And I was just clearly hearing a voice, and it says, go to Florida.
Just that specific, go to Florida.
Yes. And when I heard it, you know, I'm listening, but of course, you know, I'm still teaching and working and things like that. And I said, okay, God, I think I would like to do that. But at the time, I wasn't quite sure because I knew they had tornadoes and hurricanes in Florida.
This is true.
Yes,
is true.
so I wasn't quite ready at that time. But I listened, and I was in the process of wanting to move and go somewhere, but not exactly sure where.
Now, give us a timeline. What year was this when you heard the voice?
This was in 2003 it was.
2003. And where were you inside the school year? Was it the end of the school year? Or?
Yes, in fact, we were at the very end in June because we finished like towards the end of June.
So God waited until it was almost summer, so he knew that you could move at that point.
Yes.
So you take on this message, but there's a little fear, hurricanes, tornadoes. But did you start making plans, trying to shift your life?
Well, at that particular time, I didn't think that I was going to be moving at that time. But when I heard the voice of the Lord, and I was taking a vacation at that time, I decided to just go look to see what it looks like there.
And how old were your boys at this time?
Well, my son Jonathan was around 14 at the time.
Okay. Okay.
And he wasn't into impressing and going. But when I said a vacation, we just decided to just go take a look at Florida.
So the two of you
Yes, just the two of us
left and came down. And when you got to Florida, was there a sense of comfort, like you had arrived home, or were you still perplexed?
Well, after we had arrived there was a villa that we had used. It was someone from my church decided to let us stay there, you know, for free. And so we stayed there. We enjoyed ourselves. It was just beautiful, the atmosphere, the weather and everything. And I felt a connection. We were outside and we were playing golf and things like that. And then what happened is that I just looked up at one of the trees and I just began to weep. I just began to cry. And so when I cried a little, I just felt, you know, the Spirit of God on me, knowing that, you know, this is a beautiful place, but not knowing that this is where I was actually going to live.
Now, when you got the message to go to Florida, Florida being a big state, did you know what city you wanted to come to, or?
No, I didn't know. When we went back to New York, because, you know, we stayed for a little while. And there was a person there that I had ministered to, you know, since I was in Pennsylvania. And she had a book that gave a lot of different places in Florida. And she said, why don't you just take a look at it? And when I looked through it, I saw Claremont. But it said Rolling Hills in Claremont. And
Yes.
I said, well, I don't think there are hills in Claremont, you know, in Florida.
Until you got here.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, when you came to visit, were you actually in Claremont when you were standing before the tree?
When I was in Claremont, that was somewhere near Disney.
Okay.
So I wasn't actually in Claremont. But there was a connection because we had to get there. So in other words, it was a friend that I knew in Pennsylvania. Also, I used to minister to. She had a brother-in-law here. And she called him up and said that we were coming. And we connected with him, and he was the person who was able to take us places because I didn't have a car.
Right.
And didn't have enough money to, you know, rent a car. So he took us around. And that's how I was able to get into Claremont to look at different places.
So in this moment, when you're on this first trip to Florida and you're feeling something, obviously you're standing before this tree and you began to weep, what message was being sent to you at that time?
Well, I just felt in my spirit that this was the place that God wanted us to live. I felt that strongly in my spirit. And when we went back to Pennsylvania, then about a month later, we were here in Florida. We had actually moved back.
And this was your permanent move to Florida?
Yes.
Okay. So when you got here, did you wanted to stay in education, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Were you getting any sort of spiritual direction as far as timing? It was a right away thing, like you knew that's what you had to do right away?
I knew that coming here, I had to have a job and have a place to live. So right away, I had sent applications out, to inquire about jobs that was here. But I had initially found a place through the book that I had. So the apartment was already available for us. So when we came here, then we sort of moved on into the apartment at that time with no furniture, nothing at
Sure.
all. We just came with just a bag that we had packed with a few clothes that was in it.
Suitcases.
Yes, and not much money at that time.
Because when a move of that magnitude, I mean New York to Florida, a move of that magnitude, typically people would wait for a savings account to fill up. They would wait for a job offer. They would wait for all those things so that when they moved, it would be home.
Yes.
But you stepped out on faith, and I would say, 50% of people out there, if not more, couldn't understand that. Because when you say you had very little money, you had enough to do what? Move in?
Just to move in and have enough for about a couple of weeks.
Just a couple of weeks. And no job in sight, no promise of a job?
No, not at all. In fact, at that particular time, we were supposed to fly down. And I had a friend that said she would drive us, to Florida.
So no vehicle either?
No vehicle.
No vehicle, no furniture, suitcase,
Yes,
funds for 2 weeks,
yes,
and no job.
yes.
I mean, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Now you've got a 14-year-old who probably is used to living a certain way.
Yes,
He's used to having furniture
yes.
and, a mom that's going to provide for him.
That's right.
How is he feeling at this point?
Well, at that particular time, he wasn't happy about moving. He didn't want to come here to Florida. But we talked a lot about God because I taught, I try to train and talk and, minister to my son and teach him about God. So he knew of God. And even though at that particular time he was very uncomfortable, to move like that, but I just told him God had spoken to me. And he believed that I hear from God. And he knew that wherever I was taking him, that he was going to be safe.
Right. It would be the right place.
Yes,
The right place for you guys at the time.
yes.
So you get down to Florida and you're in this empty apartment, and what are you thinking? Are you thinking how, or are you thinking, I know God's going to provide?
Well, I knew God will provide because he always provided for us. This was a different time for me and my son. But I just trust him. I trust him with my whole heart because he has never let me down. But we do get in a situation where we become a little afraid of how everything's going to work out. But when you pray and you just believe and trust in him and stay in your word, then you know that God will provide for you. And that's what I was feeling at that particular time.
So your comfort was coming from
the Lord.
Clearly from the Lord, from the
Yes.
Word of God.
Yes.
Talk to me about the jobs. I mean, you had been applying, but nothing was coming through. And without a vehicle,
Yes.
did you have a computer to keep up with all the other things that go on with applying, especially in education? It's all internet-based, and I think it was even then.
Oh, absolutely. Where we moved, they had a place where you can come in and use the computer for free. And you can also come in and make copies and things like that and send your papers off, fax. The people that was very nice to me, they allowed me to use the telephone because we didn't have a phone.
No cell phone.
No cell phone.
My goodness.
They allow us to use the copy machine, the computers, and whatever. And so I went there to use the computer to send off my application, but there were some children working on the computer at that time. And I was so in a rush and trying to, get off my application. But that particular time, it just took me away from my problems, what was taking place in my life and my son's life. And I began to help them with their homework. And while I was helping them with their homework, the mother came in. And I spoke to her, and we made a connection. And everywhere that I needed to go, she would take me. And that was such a blessing for me at that particular time.
So once again, someone was put in your path.
Yes.
To be a blessing to you where you were at that point. So I want to talk about when you got a job and really what happened between meeting this lady and actually being able to work and provide for yourself and your son again. We're going to have more after this break. Welcome back. Now, before the break, Evangelist Robinson and I were talking about your move to Florida, your big move to Florida when God said, go to Florida. And you did. So you're in your apartment with no furniture, a suitcase, and no job, very little money. And you were telling us about a lady that you met when you were helping her children in the computer area at the apartment complex. And she began to help you.
Yes, we introduced ourselves and we talked for a while, and she had came down and she was running a little short with food and things like that. So I shared my experience with her, and as we connect together, she took me places. She took me everywhere that I needed to go. And so as I was putting in my applications, for 3 times, the school system didn't receive it. And so school had started already.
And it's harder to get a job after the school year's already started, I would imagine.
Yes, absolutely. And so what happened is that at that time, I was running low on money. We didn't have much food left. And the person that I had met, she was a little short also. And at that particular time, she had told me about the church, and I went to the church, and I talked with them, and they gave me 2 $10 Walmart cards. But
This
I didn't
is
have
a church
a car.
church that she was affiliated with.
Yes.
Okay.
But I didn't have a car at that time. And so we didn't have a way to get to Walmart's to shop, at that time. She didn't have enough gas. So I came back in my apartment with my son, and we sat there and we talked for a little while. And then knowing that we only had a pitcher of water left in the refrigerator.
So at this point, you had been here in Florida for how long?
At least about 2 weeks,
Okay.
going into the 3rd week.
So by the 3rd week, your funds were gone.
Yes.
And your son, he was in school though.
Yes, he was in school at the time.
So was he able to at least eat at school? Had you made arrangements for?
Well, since I had filled out forms at the school, they inquire your income and everything and how you're living. And I spoke to a counselor, especially for my son, because he wasn't feeling quite that well being here, not knowing anyone. And they knew that we didn't have much money, so he was on a program for lunch, which he didn't have to really pay anything at that time. So that helped him to be able to eat, while he was going to school.
At least he had that when he was in school.
Absolutely.
Tell me how it felt to be a mother who had always been able to provide for her children, to now just have a pitcher of water in the refrigerator.
It was something that I had never experienced before in my life. And of course, everyone at that time will feel afraid of what to do. You actually have no food in your home. And not only that too, is that you have children.
It's not just you.
That's right. We can, get through things, but when it comes to children, it's a little hard, So at that particular time, we had a little table in the apartment, and we had 2 blow-up beds there. And I just took my son's hands across the table, and we began to pray for the food that was not there. And as we prayed, we touched hands together and said, we trust God, because we know He will provide. And so I left and went to send out more application, and my son went to play with a friend next door. And so when we came back together, it was about maybe a couple of hours, and we came back into the apartment. And as we came back in, we talked for a few minutes. There was a knock at the door. And I couldn't imagine who was knocking on the door because we didn't know anyone there.
Right.
And so I answered the door, and there was a young lady there. She was a Latino lady, and with a big smile on her face. And she introduced herself to us, and she could see inside because nothing was there. And she asked, did I need anything? And of course, right away, I want to say what I need, but I felt a little ashamed.
Right, because you've always been able to do for yourself.
Yes.
And as a child, you always had food on your table.
Yes.
Your parents provided for you.
Yes.
So, and in the past, had you ever been in any situation where you had to ask for a handout?
No.
So this put you in this is a new territory for you.
Oh, absolutely.
What did you say to her?
I just said, we're okay, and I introduced myself, and I told her I was looking for a job, and I had sent out applications and had not heard any response back from the education department here.
You said, we're okay. I have to go back to that. You said, we're okay, and you just joined hands with your son, and you only had a pitcher of water, but you still said, we're okay. And you weren't okay.
No, I wasn't. No, we
You
weren't.
know?
No.
You and your son weren't okay.
No.
But you proceeded to tell her about your job situation.
Yes, and so she went back to her apartment, and I was sitting there just thinking, what are we going to do? But still trusting God. And then there was another knock at the door, and I opened the door, and she had pots and pans, silverware, food. She had everything that we needed. And we were so grateful that God had spoken to our heart, because I knew God did.
Yeah.
And so my son and I, we all hugged together, we cried,
Of course.
and I cooked, we had dinner and everything together, just him and I. But we just knew God was going to provide. You don't know when or how, but you just know that He will provide for you. And so when she went back to her apartment, we had eaten dinner, and the next day she knocked at the door, and she came with a list of schools. And one of the schools was Pine Ridge Elementary School. Now, for some reason, there were 3 schools, but that's the school that I felt that I needed to go to.
You felt connected to that one.
Yes, yes.
And did you physically go to the school?
Well, at that particular time, the young lady that I met, and her car was working okay then, she took me to the school. And when I arrived to the school, I met the principal there, and they needed teachers so bad that she wanted me to go and get fingerprint and everything on that very day.
Now that's something that costs money, to get your fingerprints done and everything. Is that something that the county took care of? I mean, or did you have to try to come up with funds to have that done?
I had to come up with funds, and the person that took me there, she helped me out with that, even though she was short, but she had an aunt that came down with her. So they got the money together, and I had the fingerprints done, and pictures and everything that needed. And I think the next week, I was told that I had to come to the school. And when I came to the school, I met the principal, and we sat down for about an hour and a half just talking about my trip and my problems that I had, coming here to Florida. And then the interview came later. But what she did was so amazing, is that she emailed all the teachers in the whole school and said that Mrs. Robinson need a ride going and coming.
Oh my goodness.
And there were 2 teachers that stepped up and gave me a ride going to work and coming back from work. So that was a truly blessing for me.
So you came into almost a family situation.
Yes.
Where you have a principal that was willing to hear you out and wanted to.
Yes.
Not willing to, but wanted to.
Yes.
And then she took another step. So between arriving in Florida and being hired, how many weeks had passed?
Over a month had passed, going into the second month, because school started here in August.
And the neighbor continued to help you with food?
Well, what happened after that is that the lady that was driving me back and forth, after she had went to the church, they told her about a place that give out food. And she asked me, did I want to go? I was a little reluctant.
Again,
yes.
never having been there before.
Right, absolutely. And so we decided to go. So we went and drove there. There were many people in line there waiting for food. And as I was standing there, I had this feeling come over me. And I said, I will be back one day to help feed these people. I just felt that there was such a need there. And I was in need also, and had never stood in a food line before, is that there was something that God was trying to teach me.
Right. You were at a time of testing.
Yes.
Not that your faith had always been strong, but that was a very dynamic test.
Yes,
that
it
he
was.
placed before you.
Yes.
You know, what about your family? You know, why not reach out to family for some assistance? Because with your educational background, certainly they knew you would be working. They've never known you to be that way before.
Yes.
Why not pick up the phone and call some people and try to get money?
I had tried with one of my sisters. She's a pastor in New Jersey. And I couldn't reach her. And it was hard because I didn't have access to a phone.
Yes.
And a few others that I called, I got a little money, but it was enough to last. Just enough to get something, but not enough to last.
Right. And were you able to sustain your rent for the time that you didn't have food?
When I first came down, I had paid them, you know, the amount that they needed for that particular month.
Okay.
And so September was coming up. And I was like, gosh, you know, rent has to be paid again. So when I was hired at the school, there was a person there that was in charge of the education department if teachers needed to go for extra, you know, learning, new teachers and whatever. So there was a class that was taking place in Orlando. And that class paid the same amount of rent that I had to pay for my apartment for September.
Now that's what we call divine intervention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it
So
was
did
only
you get
for,
it in time? Did you make it in time for them to accept it and not have to be at risk of losing your apartment?
No, it was a little late, but what was so wonderful about it is that the class was only for 1 week, and they paid us immediately after, because sometimes you have to wait.
Sure. Sure.
So that truly helped me out for the month of September.
So you're slowly finding your purpose in all of this.
Yes.
In all of your experiences, and all of these people that are placed in your path, and things begin to move in all the right directions. And after this experience, you decide it's time to put this in writing. And we're going to
Yes.
talk about your book when we return. We'll have more with evangelist Janice Robinson after this break.
It's a beautiful day.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, we were discussing your getting a job, getting
Yes.
into this elementary school and having people that were put in your path that made it easy for you to, we don't want to say easy, because it was definitely a challenge that you went through, but made it possible, maybe a better choice of word, to get to work, to get home from work. You were able to provide for your son, for yourself, get food on the table, and I'm sure start getting some furniture,
Yes.
some real beds. And how did that feel for you?
I felt wonderful because I knew God was going to work things out for us. It was a sense of feeling at home there at that time. When I had met another teacher at my job, she knew I didn't have a car, and I shared with her some of the things, you know, that I was in need of. But she knew that I needed a car to get back and forth.
Right.
Even though the teachers, you know, were helping me out. And she took me to a place where she had recently bought her car. But at the time, my credit wasn't too great. And so when we went there, we were there for hours, and she had to leave and go home because it was late, you know. And we didn't even know where to go to get back home. Didn't even know if we were going to be able to get a car.
Right, because she was your ride,
Absolutely.
correct?
Mm-hmm. And so the gentleman that I was speaking with, he said, "You're a teacher?" And I told him yes. So they went in the back, and they did a lot of paperwork and a lot of talking. And he came out and said, "We want you to get to work on time for your class."
Oh, my goodness.
And he just held the keys up. And I cried because I knew that was one of the most important things we needed too, besides the food.
Yes, because you have to be able to get around, and
Yes.
and there, out in that area, our viewers aren't probably familiar with Claremont, but as far as a bus system and things like that that you would have inside of a bigger city, those things just aren't available
No, they're not.
to you. So public transportation, although it exists, it really exists to get in and out of the bigger areas as opposed to getting you back and forth to the grocery store.
Yes.
So you decided one day that you needed to put this on paper.
Yes.
So when did you start? We know you moved in 2003.
Yes.
When did you start writing the book?
In 2004, I was leaving my bedroom. I was walking through my living room, and I'm always praising God and just thanking Him for all that He had done for us. And I just heard a title, Hope Without Faith. And I said, God, it sounds like a title of a book. And I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. But I had so much work, you know, at school with paperwork and everything. And didn't even imagine that I wanted to write a book. I never thought of writing a book. But I let this go on for a few years.
But you never thought you would move to Florida.
No.
You never thought, you never thought you'd be without food.
That's right.
And now this.
And so at that time, I decided that I think I'm going to try this, see what happens. And so maybe in 2000, I think it was 6, I still went back, writing maybe a sentence at a time, not even a paragraph, you know, but just believing and trusting that this is something that God wants me to do. There's a reason for everything.
Sure.
And so I continue writing the book. I continue to just trust Him in what He wants me to write this book about. And I just started from my beginning of my life, how I was raised, and lead up into each step that I took to get here.
Your
And
journey.
my journey. And with God leading the way, of course, and the struggles that came, you know, to me and my son.
How did you choose to make it an autobiography? Because a lot of people are fearful of putting their own story out there.
I felt that I had to go back to where I was raised, to share with people about my life and my experience, and especially experience with God, because I trust Him in so many things of my life. And to have the faith to truly believe that whatever we go through in life, if we stay in the Word and we trust Him, that He will make things right for us. And so I needed the readers to understand that the life that I came from is what built me up to be the person that I am today.
Right. And so you chose the title that you were given, which is Hope Without Faith.
Yes.
And your subtitle is How to Ignite God's Supernatural Blessings Upon Your Life.
Yes, that came a little bit later, because the more that I began to write my book, the more I stayed in the Bible. Because I wanted to read the scriptures and let the scriptures be embedded in me as I put them in the book. So when people read my book, they can actually go to the scriptures in the Bible and read the true word of God, that it is real, it's in the Bible, this is what it says. So from my experience in going through the various struggles, is that reading the Bible and reading the scriptures and meditating on the scriptures, it would help you to be able to, go through the struggles, that people do go through in life.
So you wanted to make sure that that true relevance in the Word was present.
Yes.
And what will people gain when they read the book? What do you want them to, if you polled 10 readers, what would you want them to say they got from it?
Well, I want them to feel that they received a sense of knowing that, when everyone hopes for things in their life, but once you're hoping for things, I want the readers to when they read in the book, to understand that their faith has to rise up. And in order for their faith to rise up, they have to be able to read the Word, the true Word of God, which would inspire them to know that the way life is, it won't be that way all the time. That we do go through struggles in life, but we come through it by reading the Word, by trusting God, and by knowing that whatever happens in your lifetime, that through the Word, it says that God says He will provide for us. And if you truly believe that in your heart and in your spirit, man, that you will be okay, that God will intervene in your situation.
Because people have a tough time believing that bad things really do happen to good people. They don't want to believe that there's a period of testing that's not. God wouldn't do that because God only does good things. But the works afterwards, I mean, it's like what you went through.
Yes.
That was something that was not good, but it happened to a good person, but it was still ordained by God.
Yes.
So if people can get that from your book, I mean, that is an amazing experience just in and of itself.
Yes.
Now, what do you say to a skeptic that comes to you and says, I don't believe that you heard the Word of God. This that's written in this book, it's not true. You just needed to see a psychiatrist. It's not really what it is.
Well, I would just tell them to go to the Bible. We have to read the Word. Once you read the Word, and once you be in agreement with someone, you have to have someone that knows about the Lord too. And when two or more are in agreement with something, then God works it out for you. But you have to believe for yourself. Once you read the Word, you have to know God for yourself. You have to try Him for yourself.
Yes.
And if you at least try it, when God sees a willing heart, He works with that individual person. But you have to truly know that in life, that everyone go through some type of struggle. And you wonder, how can you get through your struggle? But when you read the Word and meditate on the Word and develop an intimacy with the Lord, then things will come a little easier for you.
And I think if people can read your book and read about your struggles, they'll feel like they're not alone. And they can actually believe that good things can happen on the other side.
Yes.
On the other side of that trouble, on the other side of that pain, there can be joy.
Yes.
And they'll get that from you,
Yes.
from your writings and your teachings. Now today, you're not teaching anymore.
No, not.
When did you leave the school?
This was September 27th of 2010.
2010. Okay, so not that many years out. And since then, obviously you've got your book.
Yes.
But what has Evangelist Janice Robinson been working on?
Well, quite frankly, we have a nonprofit organization. It's Man of Outreach,
Okay.
Men and Women of Purpose, and we have our organization have women's conference in Claremont at the Claremont Community Center, and we invite people to come, and we have guest speakers and pastors and evangelists, and we have we have people that come and do worship dance and people that also give the word. And from that, what we do is we give out food.
Yes.
And we give out clothing to people. And this is one of the things I feel that God wanted me to write this book, is that what I experience will give me a better understanding of people that are going through what I went through.
Yes.
That I can relate to them much better because I've actually went through it.
Oh, yeah.
Where I didn't have any food at all and didn't know anyone in Florida and didn't know where to go. So from that, I feel that this book here, if people would buy the book and read it and look at the struggles and be able to relate to the struggles they also are going through, in life right now, which there are many people that's going through struggles right now.
Absolutely, especially right now. We're still in a very difficult financial time.
Yes.
People are having a lot of financial struggles. But when you speak to someone who can truly relate, because we can be empathetic to the situation, but if you've never been there, then you truly don't know what it feels like.
That's right.
And so for you to be able to speak, now are you the executive director of Mana Outreach?
Well, it's 3 of us, and we just don't have any titles.
Okay.
I mean, we're evangelists. One is a
Yes.
pastor. And we felt on the call of God. I've been with these ladies since I almost came. It was about, let's say, about 8 years now. Okay, because when I first came, I didn't know anyone. About 8 years, we've been praying for people and coming together and praying for our families and other families and having these organizations for people to come and see who we are. And then that's when we do the reach out, to people. And also my church, Celebration of Praise Church in Claremont, Florida. I'm part of the Praise Pantry. So once a month, we gather the food and we feed the people.
That's amazing how everything has come full circle. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your story, your book. I can't wait to read it. I certainly wish you God's blessings upon you and the organization and all the wonderful things that I know that you're going to be doing for people.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Journey. If you'd like to learn more about Evangelist Janice Robinson or purchase a copy of her book, please visit the website www.trueperspectivepublishing.com. I hope you were able to relate to, connect with, and be empowered by my guest today. Again, I'm your host, Robin Reed, and I look forward to seeing you on our next journey.
The sun shines bright as it moves across my face. I feel the light and everything is in its place. Oh, I woke up feeling great. Today was made for me. And life is good the way it should, the way it was meant to be.